Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. I welcome you to the series History, Science and Faith in Islam. In today's session, inshallah, we'll take a tour of the Islamic world as it existed in the 14th century. Ibn Battuta embodies the universal spirit of humankind to explore, learn, document, and teach. Born in 1304 in the Moroccan city of Tangier, he set out to perform his Hajj as a young man of 21. From Mecca, he embarked on a journey that took him over a span of 25 years to all the major centers of world culture. Undoubtedly, one of the greatest travelers the world has known, Ibn Battuta belongs to a select group of explorers like Fahian of China in the 6th century, Ibn Jubair of Spain in the 12th century, and Marco Polo of Venice in the 13th century. The historical importance of Ibn Battuta lies in his Rehla, which is travelogue, which provides a snapshot of the Islamic world as it existed in the first half of the 14th century and its relationship with the other centers of global and regional power. Ibn Battuta personally met some of the major figures who have left their imprint on history, including Ibn Khaldun of the Maghrib, Ibn Taymiyyah of Syria, Sultan Abu Sa'id of Persia, Iraq, Sultan Nuruddin Ali of East Africa, Sultan Orkhan of the Ottoman Empire, Sultan Muhammad bin Tughlaq of India, Sultan Al-Zahir of Indonesia, Emperor Togun Taimur of China, Mansa Sulaiman of Mali, and some of the most important and prominent Sufi sheikhs of the era. His impressions of these men provide invaluable information about the movers and shakers of the era. His observations on the customs, values, and institutions of the societies he visited provide a first-hand account of the unity as well as the cultural diversity in the Muslim world as it existed at that time. In the first half of the 14th century, the world was at relative peace. The Crusades had ended, and the Mongol slaughters were a thing of the past. In the Maghrib, there existed a balance of power between the Muslims and the Christians. The Al-Muhaddis dynasty in the Maghrib had broken up and its place taken by 4 separate powers: the Marinids of Morocco, the Wadids of Algeria, Hafsids of Tunisia, and the Nasirids of Granada. There was relative quiet between these sultanates and the Christian kingdoms of Castile and Aragon. This equilibrium allowed the Straits of Gibraltar to be open to shipping, and Venetian and Genoese vessels were able to cross the straits and trade with the western shores of France and England. The prosperous city-states of Italy experienced the first wave of the Renaissance. Egypt, Syria, and the Hejaz were under the Mamluks of Egypt, who had earned the respect of the Islamic world by their victory over the Mongols. Moreover, after the destruction of Baghdad, Cairo had become the seat of the Khilafat. Cairo and Damascus became world-class cities due to the trade with India and China through Yemen. Persia was back in the fold of Islam, and there began tremendous reconstruction works in Persia, Iraq, and Khorasan. The Silk Road to China was reopened. The Ottoman Turks were continuing their relentless advance into Europe. while the Byzantine emperors tried to contain them through treaties and marriage ties. In India and Pakistan, the rich and powerful Tughlaq dynasty ruled, heir to the mighty Khiljis, who had left a consolidated subcontinent under the military political control of Delhi. Islam had entered Malaysia and Indonesia, and the Sultanate of Aceh eagerly sought scholars and jurists who were fleeing the Mongol devastations of the previous century. China was still ruled by the Mongol, namely the Yuan dynasty, which had brought the northern and southern halves of China under one flag. West Africa witnessed the great Mali Empire at its zenith. The cement that bound and held this far-flung Islamic world together was the Sharia. Ibn Battuta was trained in the Sharia and its application in the Maliki school of fiqh. As such, he carried the credentials of a Qazi that was to serve him well in a world that was at relative peace with itself under the umbrella of a Sunni vision of Islam. Second only to the law as a universal binding force was the Arabic language. Even in the eastern parts of the Islamic world, wherein Farsi was the literary language, Arabic enjoyed a unique place as the language of the Quran and Hadith and as the medium of transmission of the law. The law and the language were the universal forces that held the Muslims together, even as they fought amongst themselves and with non-Muslims for power and position. Political power and the mastery of the great landmass, extending from Mauritania to Bengal in the east, gave them control of the trade routes linking the principal seats of civilization, namely China, India, Persia, Egypt, Italy, and West Africa. This vast network of trade routes was jealously guarded and protected by the regional monarchs who knew that their own prosperity depended on international trade. A traveler could move from Mali to Delhi without leaving the familiar religious and linguistic framework of the Muslims. Trade, as well as the competition amongst the rulers for prestige, facilitated the movement of scholars, architects, doctors, engineers, poets, and men of learning who sought gainful employment at the various courts. This movement provided a powerful engine for the spread of knowledge and the diffusion of faith. The beneficiaries were the peripheral territories that had recently come under the political sway of Islam. These territories included India and Pakistan, Indonesia, Malaysia, Turkey, and West Africa. It was during this period that the technology of gunpowder moved from China to West Asia and from there to Europe. The 14th century transformed the Islamic landscape and shifted the center of gravity of Islam from its traditional Arab-Persian heartland to the regions that hold the largest number of believers today, namely Indonesia, Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, and Nigeria. The importance of the external links provided by the divine law, the Arabic language, and trade routes is obvious. Of equal importance was the spiritual unity of Islam, which had asserted itself at the height of the Mongol catastrophe, and now was the principal vehicle for religious expression. Like a vast subterranean lake of fresh water linking small islands, this spirituality linked the lands inhabited by the Africans, the Arabs, the Persians, the Turks, the Indians, and the Malays. Transcending geography and culture, it provided the motive force for the migration of great Sufi sheikhs into the heartland of Hindustan and the dispersed islands of East Indies. It was also the engine that propelled the Turkish advance into southeastern Europe. As one Sufi order or the other influenced the Ghazi brigades of the Turks. The Chishtiya order had penetrated the jungles of central India, and Mullams, meaning Muallams or the religious teachers, traversed the African grasslands, carrying with them not just water bags to quench the bodily thirst, but the universal spirituality of Islam to quench the spiritual thirst of all human beings. By the first half of the 14th century, this spirituality had moved forward from mere contemplation and recitation to social activism and had established powerful institutions to sustain this activism. A traveler could find peace and solace at various stations, not only in the caravansarais, meaning places of rest for travelers, built by the rulers, but also in the khanqahs, or the places of retreat established by the Sufi sheikhs. Among the better known of the Sufis, whose hospitality Ibn Battuta enjoyed, were Sheikh Burhanuddin of Alexandria, Sheikh Abdurrahman ibn Mustafa of Jerusalem, Sheikh Khutbuddin of Isfahan, Chirag Dehli of India, and Shah Jalal of Sylhet. Ibn Battuta received his early education in the Maliki school of fiqh, a vocation that was to serve him well in his interactions with the learned men in faraway lands. He was also trained in the urbane manners, becoming of a gentleman of the era. Tasawwuf pervaded the Islamic social milieu, and Ibn Battuta was at home with the Sufi masters. Indeed, Ibn Battuta personified the new Muslim personality, imbibed with Sufi spirituality, which was fully integrated with the rules and regulations of the Sharia. Ibn Battuta, as a native of Morocco, was fluent in the language. Familiarity with Arabic ensured that he would find companionship with the Khazis, ulama, and the Sufis who formed the literary and spiritual elite of Islam. In 1325, he set out from Tangier to fulfill his obligation for Hajj. At that time, performance of the Hajj was not just a visit to Makkah, but an adventure through the many cities that lay in the pilgrim's path, and an opportunity to visit great mosques, madrasas, and to learn from master teachers. It was also a unique opportunity to give expression to the universal brotherhood and sisterhood of humankind. Ibn Battuta's caravan, which included noted scholars from North Africa, passed through some of the principal cities of the Maghreb, including Tlemcen, which was the capital of the Wadids, Algiers, and Tunis. Tunis was, at the time, a major trade depot and a cultural center. From Africa came gold, ivory, and nuts. From Egypt, it imported embroidery and woodwork, as well as transshipped products of the East, such as Indian herbs, medicines, spices, and Chinese porcelain. These products were sold to the city-states of southern Europe, as well as to the other cities of the Maghreb. With the breakup of the Almohades Empire, Christian armies had overrun much of Spain and had expelled most of the Muslims. North Africa, Tunis in particular, benefited from this forced migration of scholars, artisans, poets, musicians, horticulturists, and men of letters. The Hafsids, who succeeded the Almohades, continued the tradition of encouraging learning, and Tunis, with a population of over 100,000, became a center that attracted noted ulama from as far away as Cairo, Damascus, and Fez. Ibn Battuta stayed in Tunis for about 2 months, acquiring in the process some of the Andalusian refinement and court manners that would serve him well later in his travels. From Tunis, the caravan traversed the harsh Libyan desert until it arrived in the city of Alexandria. This city, located at the mouth of the Nile Delta, was a busy commercial center with a brisk trade with Venice, Genoa, Tunis, Tangier, Valencia, Sicily, and the Syrian coast. It was here that the caravan routes leading from India and the sea routes from East Africa met. All the products of Asia and Africa passed through the city. In Alexandria, Ibn Battuta met the Sufi Sheikh Burhanuddin and spent some time in his Zawiya. The elderly Sheikh gave the young traveler robes to signify his initiation into the Sufi order and showered upon him his spiritual radiance. From Alexandria, the Hajj caravan reached the great city of Cairo. Cairo at that time had a population in excess of 500,000, which was more than 15 times that of the city of London, 3 times that of the city of Tabriz, twice that of the city of Delhi. It was the capital of the Mamluk Empire. Ibn Battuta arrived in Cairo during the reign of Sultan al-Nasir Muhammad ibn Khalawun, who ruled from 1293 to 1341. A great builder, al-Nasir built more than 30 mosques and numerous schools and hospitals. The great mosque of Ibn Khalawun still stands in the old city of Cairo. The Mongol plunders in Persia, Iraq, and Central Asia had pushed a large number of scholars, Sufis, poets, linguists, architects, fuqaha, mathematicians, philosophers, and doctors into Cairo. Cairo had become the preeminent center of culture, art, and learning in the Islamic world. After the destruction of Baghdad in 1258, a surviving member of the Abbasids had been installed as the Khalifa in Cairo, and the city had become the seat of the Khilafat, and hence the focus of Islamic political life. The hospital, the word for which in Arabic was Maristan, as it was called, of Khalawun, was a marvel of this age. It contained more than 300 wards for patients and was equipped with the most advanced surgical tools of the era. The hospital was well staffed with doctors, surgeons, and attendants. There were lecture rooms, baths, libraries, and dispensaries attached to the building. Recitations from the Quran soothed the soul. Music was played to help the healing process. Treatment was free. Rich and poor were treated alike. Madrasas, meaning schools, were attached to the mosques. The concept of a mosque madrasa grew out of a Masjid al-Nabawi, the mosque of the Prophet in Medina. The idea found patronage at the highest level during the intense rivalry between the Fatimids and the Abbasids between 969 and 1100. Both Cairo and Damascus became great cities of learning. Al-Azhar grew in Cairo, and the Nizamiya College flourished in Baghdad. The example of these two capital cities was copied by the provincial centers of Merv, Nishapur, Bukhara, Samarkand, Damascus, Fez, Timbuktu, and Cordoba, as well as the cities that came under Islamic influence in later centuries, such as Delhi, Tabriz, Istanbul, and Lahore. Ibn Battuta records that the schools in Cairo were too numerous to count. Each mosque madrasa had courtyards, wherein great teachers gave lectures, and eager students learned the Quran, fiqh, Arabic grammar, mathematics, medicine, and philosophy. Although the study of more secular sciences such as mathematics, medicine, and philosophy was not available in all schools. The Hajj caravan with whom Ibn Battuta was traveling was delayed. Impatient to reach the Hijaz, Ibn Battuta took the southerly route down the Nile River and through the desert to the Sudanese port of Aydhab. He describes the Nile Valley as a veritable garden, full of life and vitality, serving as the breadbasket for the Mamluk Empire. Aydhab was a sultry harbor town, dusty, hot, without water, crammed with import-export merchandise. Forced by inhospitable weather, Ibn Battuta turned back to Cairo, and from there he traveled through the Sinai to Palestine and Syria. He prayed at the Mosque of Abraham in Al-Khalil, that is Hebron, and spent several days at Masjid al-Aqsa in Jerusalem. By 1325, Jerusalem had ceased to be a bone of contention between the Christians and the Muslims. The Crusades in Palestine had ended, and the chief attraction of the city was its pilgrimage sites for Muslims, Christians, and Jews. Ibn Battuta spent several nights in prayer at Masjid al-Aqsa and at the Dome of the Rock, recalling the events of Isra and Miraj. He also spent many days at the Zawiya of Sufi Sheikh Abdul Rahman ibn Mustafa, who belonged to the Rifai order. After receiving his ijaza, literally meaning permission, also a diploma, from Sheikh ibn Mustafa, Ibn Battuta moved on to Damascus, where he met the well-known reformer Ibn Taymiyyah, who passed away in 1328. The two were on different wavelengths. Ibn Battuta was a man of the new Sufi age. Indeed, wherever he went, he sought the company of well-known Sufis. By contrast, Ibn Taymiyyah foresaw inherent dangers in the Sufic approach, which had no empirical proofs and lent itself to exploitation by pretenders. The Sufis would respond to this charge by asserting that the best empirical proof of their approach was the noticeable transformation of human character that it brings about. Ibn Taymiyyah was very much against the allegorical interpretations given to the Quran by certain Sufi schools, and felt that the Quran had to be understood in its literal sense, as emphasized by Imam Shafi'i. Ibn Taymiyyah fought a lifelong struggle to alert his generation against what he felt were the risks that lurked in the Sufi approach. He urged Muslims to return to what he felt was the vibrant, outward, empirical Islam of the Umayyads and the Abbasid periods. Needless to say, the two men did not see eye to eye. As history would have it, the Islamic world embraced the Sufis and relegated Ibn Taymiyyah to scholars respected but forgotten. It is only in the last 200 years, since the advent of European colonialism, that the Islamic world has once again turned to the ideas of Ibn Taymiyyah to find some answers to the challenge of the West. This concludes part 1 of our presentation on the travels of Ibn Battuta. In the next session, inshallah, we'll conclude this presentation. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.